Hello, everyone. Welcome to ZinEX Social Zinstancing. I am Rebecca Robinson, Executive Director of ZAP, Zinfandel Advocates and Producers. And I am so excited to be broadcasting from Rough and Ready, California. We have an amazing show for you both today and tomorrow. So it's 1 o'clock here on the West Coast, 4 o'clock on the East Coast. And we're going to be showing wonderful Meet the Maker sessions throughout the afternoon. And we've also got a special treat with all of the winemakers who are going to be here joining us. And I'll have more to say about that in just a moment with their virtual booths. I first want to thank you all for coming to Virtual ZinEX. Usually we gather together in San Francisco and have a great time visiting and connecting as a Zinfandel community. And of course, this year we're doing it social Zinstancing wise. And it's different. And it's really strange to be talking into this and not seeing all of you, but we're here, we've got some great wines, and we've been having a lot of fun the last couple of days with some smaller breakouts. And so now it's big show time. I want to begin by thanking the staff who made this all possible. We've got Sam Kimball at the helm of New York Wine Events, who is producing for us. And Sam and I go back a few years now. I met him and said, you know, we should really be doing more in New York. And he said, well, come on over. I'm a great Zinfandel fan. And away we went. So Sam and his team are going to be the technical wizards for all of this today. I also want to thank our staff. I want to thank Glenda and Leah and Suzanne and everybody who's made this possible on the backside to be here today. And of course, I want to thank our wineries. Our winery members are the heart and soul of ZAP. And there are 40 of them participating today. And you're going to hear this throughout our event, but please go and visit them. The winemakers are going to be in their virtual booths, and it's going to be super easy for you. If you're seeing me, just scroll down the screen a little ways and you will find all these beautiful little boxes that have the winery names on them. And you just click into those and away you go on your wine country adventure. So again, you'll be hearing more about that. But again, the virtual booths are really key to this. So at this point, I think that we need to also recognize our sponsors. And if we could see that sponsor slide, we'll do some thank yous for everybody who made this possible today in Sponsorland. So you can see that everybody is there, including some great longtime returning sponsors. And so again, I just want to recognize them and their wonderful work, part of the Zinfandel community as well. So big shout out to everybody there, and we'll be hearing more from them throughout the program. Now, I think it's time, before we get too far into this, we want to show you some of the work that ZAP is doing. ZAP is an educational nonprofit organization. And for those of you who don't know, we are membership based. And if you're not a member, I encourage you to become one today. You'll see little boxes that say, check out membership. And also we've got a text to pledge to continue the important programming. And what is that important programming? It's telling the Zinfandel story. And we have had a great program called Legendary Zinfandel Vineyards that has created some absolutely remarkable videos and storytelling. And we want to share with you one of those videos right now. So I'm hoping that we can go ahead and cue that up, and I'll see you on the backside of that video.
There's this phrase, maybe you've heard it, a legend was born. But if you've ever been able to stand neck deep in a California Zinfandel vineyard and seen the fruit produced by over 100 years of effort and struggle, you may have drawn another conclusion. There is no single moment when a legend becomes a legend. Real legends are built from year upon year of determination and grit. So real legends, they're not born. Real legends are grown.
Hello, everyone. So I hope you enjoyed that video. There's going to be lots more fun throughout the day. At this point, we are getting ready to start our very first Meet the Makers session. And I want to just give a little bit of background on this. We started doing Meet the Makers at our in-person Zinfandel experience a few years ago. And it was so much fun where we could bring a winemaker in with a bottle of wine, sit down with a few folks, and just talk and just have a conversation. And we've also been doing some great work with different seminars that we've been putting together through ZinEX. So this concept virtually is a little bit of a combination of that. Don't forget that while you're watching these guys, you can throw up Q&A questions or chat. So be sure and enable that as you're watching them so that they can hear from you and ask your questions. We'll feed those to them as we go along. And so our first session today takes us to a wonderful, wonderful wine growing region that we're going to hear just some terrific winemakers tell their stories. Randy Caparoso, who has been a Zin lover for many years, and has a great story himself, is going to lead the panel. And I will let Randy introduce all of his guests, but it's so great to see everybody, and you're going to be in for a big treat. So we're going to go ahead and head over to them, and we'll see you on the backside. And you'll also be hearing from Sam. So you guys take it away, Randy, and have a great session.
Hey, thanks, Becky.
Bye, Becky.
Okie doke. Let me know when I can start. Hello.
Go right ahead, Randy.
Okay, great. So are we on live? All righty. Hello, everyone. Randy Caparoso here. So this is our first of our Meet the Maker ZinEXs. A lot of fun in the safety of our rooms. The theme is legendary vineyards. And so we have great winemakers with us today. Well, actually 3 winemakers and really someone who's more of a grower. But I'm gonna ask them to talk about the focus more on vineyards, maybe so than winemaking techniques, because I think that's especially for Paso Robles is what makes a big difference. So these are Paso Robles Zinfandels. We're gonna taste 4 of them, and they're not like Napa or Sonoma or Lodi or Amador Zinfandels. They're totally different. They have things in common. They do have old vines, although only 2 of the wines we're going to taste today are actually what you can call old vine. But they also have that Mediterranean climate, those cold, wet winters and those warm, hot summers that Zinfandel loves. But what makes Paso totally different from these other regions is they have extreme diurnal swings. So anyone who's been to Paso in the middle of the summer knows it gets chilly down to even 40 degrees at 48, 49 degrees at night. And then it can get very, very warm, 90, 95 degrees. And this is a good 10-degree swings wider than any of these other regions. Paso also has a lot of those calcareous type soils and hillsides that no other region has. And so I'm going to start this off by tasting a wine, each of the 4 wines we're going to look at today. And then I'm going to ask each winemaker to connect what we're tasting in the glass with what makes the particular vineyard unique and what makes Paso unique. And I'm starting with, we're going to start with Janelle Ducey, the president winemaker of Ducey Wines. And she's showing today her Dante Ducey Vineyard Zinfandel. And when I taste it, this is a deep colored wine. And what I like about it, it's got the whole Zinfandel spectrum there. You got blue fruit, you got black fruits, you got red fruits, and I get a lot of peppery spice. Maybe Janelle can talk about that. And this sort of distinct mineral quality behind it. The wine is not a lightweight. It's 15.9% alcohol. It's very full. It's zesty, and it's got firm tannins. So even though it's on the big side, it's very even keeled and balanced. Janelle, you want to talk about Dante Ducey?
Absolutely, yes. Here, Janelle, coming from you, the JDC Winery in Paso Robles, and I'm really, really proud and happy to be showing the Dante Ducey Zinfandel today to you guys, because that's where I grew up. It was my family ranch where I still live today. So all those grapes come from the Dante Ducey Vineyard, planted in 1945. So old vines in. And what's unique about our vineyard is that it's widely spaced, so 10 by 12 feet spacing in some areas, because in order to be dry farm like that, they need as much surface area to get down to its own natural water table. So I feel like our Zinfandel, being alive and lasting through the summer times and that dry heat, it really stresses the vines out to dig down and find that natural water table. And fortunately, the harder they struggle, the more, more their energy just comes out into the limbs and into the grapes and the clusters, creating this nice, little bit more smaller berries, nice intense fruit characteristics. And my Zinfandel, I really try to create a balanced Zinfandel, a more medium restrained style. And I really want to show the farming that goes into the land, since I'm 4th generation growing up and farming this land. I want to show what happened in the vintage year. I want to say in 2018 what the growing season was like, and to keep it mild, keep all that bright fruit forwardness on there that you touched upon, the different berry flavors, while holding on to that little bit of spice on the back finish. And I feel like those are 2 big characteristics in Zin, and really trying to make a very medium-bodied wine without being too over the top, jammy, or high alcohol. So trying to keep the alcohol down on Zinfandel is always a challenge, especially our hot summer days. But getting it in under 15% is definitely the goal. Can you guys, am I hearing me okay?
Well, I'm doing good on my side.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I'm 4th generation, the grape farming side. First one to start making the wine. So I put my Ducey Wines on there, and I take about 20% of the Dante Ducey Vineyard for my own wines. Otherwise, we still sell to a lot of other wineries here in Paso Robles area.
And Janelle, these are 1945 vines, so they are old vine?
Exactly, yes. So on the west side of the 101, we are right bordering up to the highway, and that vineyard was planted in 1945. So old vines in, I think you really get that classic Zinfandel characteristic in here. But Zin's all about the fruit. So I really want to keep it bright and light fruit rather than that dark and jammy kind of fruit for a Courtney wine. Was there a question I'm supposed to answer? Okay, they hear me great.
Oh, why don't we'll move on,
Should we keep
and then
talking about the vineyard a little bit more?
Maybe. Well, you have a minute more, Janelle. Why don't you go ahead?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I think we're gonna taste more Zinfandel from the Ducey Vineyards from Ridge across the way in a little bit. And what's really cool about these two vineyards, I'll just touch a little bit about them because we're going on to a different Ducey Zin planted in 1925. So even though these vineyards are about a mile apart from each other, they have different rainfalls, they have different temperatures, about a 3 to 5 degree temperature difference. And that's what makes it so unique about doing a vineyard designation by vintage, is that you really see what Mother Nature brought to you in that vintage, because it all comes out in the grapes. Too much wind, too much rain, not enough rain, a drought year. All of those Mother Nature elements come into play. And I love to see 100% Dante Ducey Zinfandel from 2018 and really see what was going on in the farming and in the soil for that vintage. So it'll be fun to try Ridge's Benito Ducey, which was the original Ducey Vineyard, up in a little bit.
Great, thank you, Janelle. This time I want to go to a wine made by Peachy Canyon, and this is their D block. And the reason why I want to go to them is they're very close by to Dante Ducey, and it's a little bit different in that it's not so much an old vine. And I'll let our winemaker Drew Phillips talk about that. But when I taste it, I get similar qualities that I found in the J Ducey. A lot of mineral, red and black fruit qualities. It's very, very bright. What I love about it, it's more of a firm medium body. It's not, I wouldn't describe this as a big style of Zin. I would describe it more as a medium weight Zin. In fact, it's 13.8% alcohol, but it's very zesty, very well balanced. I love to describe this type of Zin as very buoyant and fresh. And so Drew, why don't you talk about D block and what I'm tasting here?
So D block's a pretty interesting project that Peachy King got involved with in about 2009. In D block, we have all 18 heritage clones of Zinfandel, which were clones that the ZAP organization and University of California, Davis worked together to preserve. And they were all cuttings that were taken from 100-plus-year-old Zinfandel vineyards across the state. And one thing led to another. And when the vineyard was taken out of the Oakville station up in Napa, they tried to make sure that some of this budwood would be preserved, and so that the genetics would be preserved for generations. And so they spread out plantings of these 18 clones all over the state. I believe Ridge has the 18 clones planted, as do we, and I think that Joel Peterson has it planted also. And if I'm also not mistaken, everyone has the clones planted on St. George rootstock, same spacing, which I believe is 6x9. And really, it's only an acre block that we have that we keep separate from everything else because it is so unique. And we pick the whole acre at once and co-ferment all 18 clones. We've since propagated those clones to our old schoolhouse vineyard, and we've started experimenting with fermenting all of them separately. But because it's such a small amount of fruit, what we tend to do year to year is ferment D block in brand new French oak barrels. We'll pop heads and we'll fill them up with grapes, and it helps us to really mellow the mouthfeel while stabilizing a lot more color. And you get a really robust kind of oaky backbone without it being as overpowering as it might be if we'd put fermented wine into brand new barrels. And it's something that we take a lot of care when we're producing because it's something we consider to be special. You know, so we're really happy to be a part of that whole project. And, you know, it sits on top of one of our dry farmed hills at our ranch on Nacimiento Lake Drive in Paso Robles. So we're in the Adelaide region versus the Templeton Gap. And the couple miles we are north of where Dante Ducey and Benito Ducey Vineyards are is a world of difference in terms of the flavors and the growing season. The past 3 years that we've been producing wines from those hills, D-Block included, we've been some of the first people in town bringing in red wines because everything around is dry farmed. It's on a hilltop. We ripen early, and it kind of shows in that 13.8% alcohol and our restraint as compared to opulence that has turned into sort of the signature of some wines around town. So it's really a labor of love for us.
That's terrific. And I will add that this is 100% Zinfandel, although one of the 18 clones is a Primitivo, which is clonal variant of Zinfandel, but which does absolutely fantastic in Paso Robles. So commonality with J. Ducey, again, the mineral and the acidity. To me, you don't really get as much of that in other Zinfandels in most regions. And the acidity, even though Paso can be considered a warm climate, it does have those cool nights, but it does have a lot of calcareous soils. And from what I understand, Drew, this vineyard sits on a solid block of white chalky soil, high pH soils, which tend to give grapes with high acids. You want to chat a little bit about that? And
yeah, it's kind of interesting. The site where our home ranch, our Mustang Springs Ranch sits, it has these two really big hills, for lack of a better term. Before the Beckett's purchased the property in 2000, it was a winery called Two Hills Winery, I think. And they're prominent. You can see them from the roadway going out to the lake. But the hills themselves are, most of the soil in that part of Adelaida is an alluvial soil from the Salinas River, from the Estrella River. It's all kind of waterborne deposits. But these hills stick up above where any water erosion has occurred in, well, longer than any of us have been around. And they're actually inclusions of Linicoloto, which is the prominent soil from the Willow Creek AVA. And that soil in particular has a high percentage of clay and a lot of decomposing calcareous elements to it. I mean, you can find, if you go kick rocks around in the vineyards, you'll find, fossils of clamshells and such from the ocean.
Okay, so
I think
we're going to move on. Thank you.
Paso kind of appreciates that.
So I want to move on to another interesting vineyard, and this wine is totally different. We're going to now go to a Chronic Cellars Dead Nuts. It doesn't say Zinfandel on it because there's only 74% Zin. It also contains Petit Syrah, Tempranillo, and Alicante Bouchette. Like the D block, it's made from younger vines. The D block, by the way, I believe was planted in 2011. So it's different from the Ducey Vineyards, which are very old vines. This wine has beautiful red fruit. It's totally different from the other two wines. It's more black cherry strawberry. It has terrific acid, notable acid. And I love the fact that you get all that fresh, zesty fruit without a lot of oak. And so here to talk about is Kip Lorenzetti, the assistant winemaker here at the winemaker at Chronic Cellars.
She was laughing at me. Yeah, thanks, Randy. Yeah, so for the dead nuts, the two main components, the Zinfandel and the Petit Syrah, both came from the DuBose Vineyard, which if we're geographically put in relation to where coming off of what Drew was saying about the D block. So as the crow flies, probably about 10 miles west, and it's a dry farm vineyard, and it's in in the Adelaida district of Paso Robles, which in that section of Adelaida, much like Drew was talking about the chalky soil and the the bright white rock just beneath the soil in that deep part. It's full blown stone, and that really way that manifests in the wine. And I've been trying to make this catch on for the past few years now. All of us are very familiar with Rutherford dust. It's a very common characteristic in Napa Cab. I've just been relating Paso dust at tastings and hoping it catches on. But you get that it's there. It's this very chalky. It's a very dusty flavor in a beneficial way. And the Zins out of that back corner of Adelaida, you get what you were talking about. You get that bright, zesty cherry, as well as the very balanced acidity. You know, this wine is, if you on the palate, it's very balanced. It's got that very balanced acidity. The tannins are structured but not overpowering. But it's also at 15% alcohol, so it carries that that horsepower pretty well. And I feel that the wines that coming out of that section of Paso Robles have that balance where you get these complex fruit notes. And in this blend, in particular, the Petit Syrah out of that same vineyard, you get a lot of cracked black pepper on that, as well as that really those fine structured tannins. And to me, that section of Paso just really creates that complexity.
Terrific. Okay. So we kind of saved I guess the classic for last. We're going to taste now the Ridge Paso Robles Zinfandel, which is made from Benito Ducey Ranch, and Benito being again, I think Janelle is your great grandfather. He also planted your vineyard, and although the difference is Ridges is planted in 1925. You can go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong, but
yes, both vineyards are planted by my father.
yes. Okay, so the Ridge is, well, it's Ridge Ducey, and this is huge. Not in terms of explosive body. I mean, it is full body, but it's huge in terms the fruit is teeming, and it's a lot of cherry, a lot of pure fruit. A lot of people say that red fruit, that cherry fruit, is kind of a component of Ducey clones, also, when compared, to other clones in the Zinfandel Heritage project. There is a lot of tannin grip in the Ridge, and it's very full and fleshy and ripe. Here to talk about it is David Gates, the Senior Vice President of Vineyard Operations for Ridge Vineyards. David?
Thanks, Randy. It's great to be on a panel with everybody, especially talking about Paso Robles. We've been making the Benito Ducey Ranch wines, buying his grapes. The first year was actually it's a pre-Paul Draper wine or vineyard for us. In 1967, Dave Bennion was our first founding winemaker at Ridge, and he met up with Benny in 67 and bought grapes. Benny was making his own wine at that time, and by 76 we were going in and buying most of the ranch. Benny always sold to a lot of home winemakers, and in fact Mike Ducey still does, one or two that are some of them third generation. But we've been making this wine ever since. We love this vineyard. We love the fruit from it. It kind of, I wouldn't say the wine makes itself, but pretty much it does. The biggest thing is when to pick. It sits on alluvium that's pretty good amount of calcium and limestone, but it's all alluvium right off the Salinas River. There's a cement plant to the south of it, a brewery, and a garden shop to the north of it, and across the street's a shopping center. So I remember the first time I went down there in 1989, none of that was there. So, well, I think the cement plant was there, but the town has kind of grown up around it, and thankfully the vines are still there. So the oldest vines there are own rooted, planted in the 20s. What Benito Ducey, it was and he passed away in 2019. Lived a beautiful man, lived a beautiful life, and he was a consummate farmer. the own-rooted vines, there's just enough clay in that soil to support phylloxera. So eventually phylloxera found some vines there. And so for the last 40 something years, he's been replacing, 5 to 10 to 100 vines a year as they die from phylloxera. And he would still prune it. I call it old school. So they're widely spaced, just like Janelle was saying at Dante Ducey. The vines, as they grow up, he'd leave one spur the first year, 2 spurs the second year, and just increase that so that the vines are their little, basically little trees that kind of start out from the ground and work their way up, and they're absolutely beautiful. And that way he didn't have to thin, because Benny never thinned. Mike Ducey is now farming it and has been as Benny's health kind of declined. Mike Ducey took over the farming, helping out his uncle, and couldn't be more pleased to work with the Ducey family all these years. And what I love about this wine is that it has bright acidity, and it comes in early for us. Typically, the fruit expression is always has the red spectrum, right? Cherries, which you don't always get in Sonoma County Zinfandel. And the tannins, 18 is an exception. 18 has some pretty grippy tannins. Usually the tannins are soft, and so it's a very luscious wine, but very light on its sweet. So it fills your mouth up and then disappears. And I love that wine, and it ages beautifully, especially in a year like 2018.
Now, when it comes to ageability, I think anyone who's aged Zinfandels 20, 30 years, I think they all know that the key to that is a balanced wine and wines with great acidity. And that is, even though people think, oh, Paso Robles, that's a hot region. Yes, it's warm. It does get warm. Yes, they get 95, 100 degrees summer days, but they have those soils where these grapes retain a lot of natural acidity, and that's attributed to can attribute that to the soil. And who would like to talk maybe about the Ducey clone? I mean, in the Paso, they have been growing other clones like, Duprat and Primitivo, but the Ducey clone is a classic, and it does kind of gives its own aromatic character. Anyone wish to comment on that?
I would defer to Janelle. I don't want to step on toes, but we do make over at Peachy. We do make one of our single vineyard zins is from a block of. We've been making it since, gosh, I think it was the second wine Doug started producing when Peachy Canyon was founded. It's called a Special, and it's a wine that basically Doug talked to Benny and got cuttings a long time ago at the old Peachy Canyon winery, which is on Peachy Canyon Road, where Mafee and Young Winery is currently, and planted a bunch of Ducey clones, Zinfandel, and I mean, this story goes back to when Tobin James was the winemaker for Doug, and a long time ago, but they were making a Special Zinfandel out of Ducey clone Zinfandel, and it's something that we do to this day, because like you're saying, that clone, and like David said, fills your mouth up. It's so voluptuous, and then it just kind of fades off without a high impact of tannin. It doesn't grip you, it doesn't dry you out too much, but it leaves you wanting another sip, especially when there's high acidity in the wine.
And it has that cherry strawberry. Janelle, you want to comment on your family?
One of the notable, it's fun since we sell grapes to so many producers here in Paso, and there's always that same underlying characteristic, those lighter, brighter fruits in everybody's wine, with their own touches of winemaking styles upon it, and barrel regimes, things like that. I did notice there was a question about Paper Street, and we took cuttings from the Ducey Vineyard, put it on resistant rootstock, and planted it up at our new vineyard called Paper Street in 2013. And it's so interesting to see vineyard planted at 800 feet elevation. One of the biggest differences is that Paper Street Zinfandel is planted at about 1,800 feet elevation. super steep hillsides and seeing what the elevation does. You still have that fruit, it's a little bit more concentrated, but that elevation brings this like deeper, darker color, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Okie doke. 2 minutes left. Someone asked about ageability. I'll just go right back to that. My thing is, Zinfandel needs to be balanced. It has great acid. It doesn't matter whether it's 12.5 or 13% alcohol or 16% alcohol. It has to be balanced, and if it is, it can go long ways. Maybe David, you want to talk a little bit about ageability in your experience.
Well, we've had the privilege to work with the Benito Ducey Ranch for many years, and we make a couple other zins that we're really proud of. Two of them estate vineyards, Lytton Springs and Geyserville, and another one from the Pagani Ranch in Sonoma Valley, and they all we feel like they can age fairly well, and we always kind of thought, Paso, it's beautiful when it's young, so why would you ever age it? So about 5 or so years ago, we did a mini vertical where we were tasting Lytton Springs, Geyserville, and Paso Robles, and we went back 25 years. And there were years where the Paso was unbelievable at 20 years old, 15 years old. So if it's a year where there's enough acidity in the wine, it's absolutely amazing how it can hold up. And it's Zinfandel as it ages. For me, it's an old red wine is an old red wine, but Zinfandel always has this pure core of fruit that really makes it unique. It doesn't tend to dry out as it gets older, and that's what I really love about it.
Terrific. Okie dokie. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists. This is a nice, short, and sweet seminar, and we're going to move on. But thank you, everyone out there who joined us for this first Legendary Vineyard seminar. And this whole thing continues for the rest of the day as well as tomorrow. And maybe I'll see some of you tomorrow, or you'll hear my lovely voice tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Hey, Randy, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody in this great session. Kip and Janelle, Drew, and David, so many great insights. And it's wonderful to get so much great information. We will see you guys back in your virtual booths during the festival. For everyone watching, please make sure to visit the virtual booths. There's all kinds of great additional information, other wines, special offers. You can hear the stories and learn more about America's heritage grape. And I do want to say one thing, which everyone who's participating from the winemaker side, but also those of you watching, this is, I think, the largest virtual wine festival with a live stream that's actually happened so far since the pandemic began. We have 40 plus wineries, incredible bounty of riches of winemakers. And so applause all the way around. It's wonderful. We're having so much fun. We will come right back, and we will be back shortly. Thank you.
My name is Andrew Botine, Senior Vice President of Tricor Brown Wine Pack. As North America's largest wine bottle distributor, Tricor Brown Wine Pack simplifies the packaging procurement process so you can focus on winemaking. Even in uncertain times, we are dedicated to providing access to the highest quality packaging and reliable customer service. We remain open for orders with uninterrupted warehousing and repacking capabilities. Especially now, it's important to choose a packaging partner with exceptional resources and global reach. Tricor Brown Wine Pack is here to help.
Hello, everyone. Wasn't that a great kickoff to our ZinEX Meet the Maker sessions? And now we're going to be heading to North Sonoma for legendary Zinfandel Vineyards discussion. And whether it is a new vineyard, as they were talking about with Paper Street, or some of these classic old vine vineyards, the single vineyard nature of Zinfandel is really very special. And that's one of the things that they're going to be presenting this afternoon. I am seeing so many wonderful questions come through, and I just wanted to remind everybody that these are short, snappy sessions, and if we don't get to your questions, please visit the virtual booth and you'll have a chance to visit more with the winemakers and find out in depth all those little things that you wanted to know about those wines. There are also some wonderful special offers available in the booth, so please do take advantage of that. Again, you just scroll down from this main screen and click away. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ian Blackburn, and he's going to lead this illustrious panel. So Ian, take it away and let's go to Northern Sonoma.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm deeply privileged to be here today to talk to you guys about Northern Sonoma and with some legendary brands and producers on the Zoom. Let's get started. We're going to go right into a little PowerPoint as a guide that I have, and if it becomes a problem, we'll end that. But I like to introduce each of the brands. We're going to start off with Jeff Stewart, winemaker for Hartford Court Wineries, Hartford Family Winery. And Jeff, how are you?
Doing great today, Ian. Good to see you. Good to see everybody out there, sort of.
Fantastic. I'm going to spotlight you, Jeff. How long have you been at Hartford Court, Jeff?
I've been here about 10 years. So worked for Don and Jenny here at the winery for the last 10 years. Worked for them back in the 90s at another winery as well. So I have a long history with the family here.
Well, congratulations on all the success. The slogan is high risk, high reward. And single vineyard wines, and that's what we're going to be tasting today. I noted that my bottle was a 2017 Hartford Court Finucci, but the website is now 18. What would you prefer to talk about, Jeff?
Well, we can talk about both. There literally is about 4 cases here at the winery of the 17 left, and the 18 is for sale now as well. So anybody out there that is interested in either vintage is there. It's, same vineyard, obviously. So, I mean, you've tasted the 17 just recently, so why don't we talk about that? And I can comment on 18 as we go along.
Fantastic. Well, Finucci Road is a spectacular old vine vineyard site. What do you find that it brings to the wine? What does Finucci Road bring to the wine for you?
Yeah, so this vineyard is on a road called Wood Road, right in the heart of the Russian River Valley. We produce 7 different Zinfandels here at Hartford these days. 4 of those are single vineyards from the Wood Road area, the Finucci, Wood Road, Highwire, Dina's, and the Hartford Vineyard. So it's kind of like the epicenter of our Zin world. We also do a couple wines from over on Olivet and on Piner. So all in the Russian River Valley. Everything we do is from vines that are over 100 years old. So this vineyard was planted sometime in the late 1800s, early 1900s. There's still argument about when exactly it went in the ground. But it's a really interesting comparison when you look at these various sites, as we do with the single vineyards on Wood Road. Finucci has its own unique personality, very distinct. All these vineyards are field blends, as most of us know. The majority of the fruit out there is Zinfandel, but we have mixed reds out there. There's Carignan, there's Alicante Boucher, there's Grand Noir, there's Trousseau Gris, there's all kinds of things smattered in. Finucci in particular actually has a little higher percentage of Petit Syrah, actually. So that little tweak, it's only about 2% more than most of the other vineyards. It really brings a structural element to this wine. So when you taste it next to the Hartford, which is right across the street, you see tannin, you see this dark structure to this wine that's very fruit driven, but very, very distinct and very unique.
Well, your wines always have this wonderful texture, ripeness, and depth to them. They're so flush and so tender. And I think that's really hallmarks of what I perceive from your brand. I'm not sure if you aim for that, but I love the richness, and I love the character that you bring forward. And how many different Zinfandels do you make?
So we're bottling 7 different Zinfandels, 6 single vineyard bottlings, which are, anywhere between 100 and say 400 cases. And then we do a Russian River Valley blend that is all of those sites coming together. So that's that's kind of the portfolio today. And it's something we've been doing since 1994 when the winery was founded. Don and Jenny purchased a little farm here in the early 90s when they moved to Sonoma. And that little farmhouse happened to have, at that point, an 80-year-old Zinfandel vineyard behind it. So when they started the winery in 94, it was sort of a natural progression to make a little bit of Zin. And, you know, the comment you just made about the wines being sort of, I use the word elegant, which sometimes is hard to use with, you know, you talk about elegance with a wine that is 15 or 16% alcohol. That's sort of, to some people, confusing, but we really do try and capture the essence of this vineyard. Cool climate, bright acid. We make it more like our Pinot Noir. So it is an elegant style while still being really concentrated.
Yeah, and that's just a testament to your style and the risks that you're willing to take and the reward that you're shooting for. I'm tasting the 17. I know 18 is a great vintage too, and you've already got some big scores on that wine. When was 18 released?
18 was just released January 1st, actually. So,
All right.
As I said, there's a few cases here at the winery of the 17 still available, but we're into the 18 as well.
And as far as a classic vineyard, Finucane Road has been in your portfolio for a long time. Is it a monopole? Are you the only one to make that particular vineyard? You know?
No, we actually share it. So way back, and we started producing the wine in 1996. Peter Finucane, who owns the vineyard with his family, he was making a little bit of Zin off of there back then and some Trousseau Gris. He's not producing any wine anymore, but we actually share the vineyard now with our good friends over at William Sellium and over at Deloach. So we get half the vineyard and they split the other half. So it's a, you know, we don't want to hog everything, obviously, but it's a great vineyard. It's been in our portfolio since '96, and it's really a stunning vineyard. You know, one of my favorites to work with.
Well, thank you for starting off our presentation. Classic, really important vineyard sites in Sonoma, and Russian River is in good hands with the Finucane Road and the Hartford Court. We're going to move into speaking with Allison at Baca. Hi, Allison. How are you?
I'm great, Ian. Thanks for having me today.
My pleasure. I'm going to make you the spotlight here. And Jeff, you keep your pretty face right there, and I'm just going to remove the spotlight for a second. But wonderful to meet you and be able to taste the wines with you. I know Baca is a fairly new brand in the Zinfandel kingdom, but certainly comes from a prestigious Napa producer. And are you making these wines on the Sonoma side of the fence, or do you make them over in Napa?
I'm glad you asked. I'm actually here today in the tasting lab of our Hall Family Wines facility, where we make Hall wines, Walt wines, and Baca wines. And I've actually been working for the Halls for over a decade. So it was really exciting when I was given the chance to start this Zinfandel brand Baca that launched in 2016.
Well, beautiful. And we've got a wine in front of us called Tug of War. It comes from the Mafee Vineyards. Is that how I pronounce that correct?
Mafee.
Mafee. Very good. All right. Well, tell us all about it. And I got this little slideshow here just to kind of give us a little sense of place.
Totally. Yeah, that's Hall Wines down in the bottom right corner. Yeah, when we started the Zinfandel brand, we just thought one of the very cool things about this grape is that it's really well suited to California. And you can find really fine Zinfandel in diverse locations all over the state. So we set out to find some of the most prestigious vineyards in each of these areas. And today I am presenting our Tug of War from Mafee Vineyard in the Russian River Valley. One thing that makes this vineyard very special is that we're working with very old vines. We're in a block that was planted in the 1920s. So these vines are over 90 years old now. And the vineyard is also, you can find it in the pages of the Historic Vineyard Society. So we're really excited to be helping to preserve some of this history. It's located in the Pioneer Olivet area of the Russian River Valley. So the climate is defined by really temperate days and cool, foggy nights. So we're able to achieve a really long hang time on these wines, which helps the fruit develop slowly and develop really deep flavors. We're tasting the 2018 today. And this was actually, this vintage we picked in mid-October, kind of between some rain systems there towards the end. But I'm loving this vintage. This is a small family-owned vineyard. And it's also still farmed by Joanne Mafee, who's third generation. She's the granddaughter of the folks that planted the vineyard. And it's just really important that we have a really strong partnership with her. She's very personal, very hands-on. You always find her out in the vineyard, very meticulous with her farming. And that really helps bring through the real elegance of this vineyard.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I have one more slide to show. Just this looks like it's the tasting room.
That's right. Yeah, so this is our tasting room, relatively new tasting room, opened on West Side Road in Healdsburg. We are open. Please come visit and join us on our lovely balcony outside overlooking the vineyard and sip some wine with us.
And you are a Zinfandel specialist brand. How many Zinfandels are you making?
Our core portfolio includes this Russian River. We've got 2 Zins from Napa Valley, from Pokai and Calistoga, and Black Sears on Howell Mountain. We're also, it's cool that Clay Moritzen is here on our panel today because we're making a rock pile Zin that he's been a huge help in getting us going on that one. We're also making a dry creek Zinfandel, also working with Clay on that. And it was fun listening to the previous panel too, because we make a Ducey Vineyard Zin from down in Paso Robles. So it's a really fun, diverse portfolio.
Awesome. Well, as I'm drinking the 2018 Tug of War, I love the style. It's got wonderful balance. Seems to be a little spicy at this moment.
Totally. You know, what I'm going for in my winemaking here is a really fresh, elegant approach to the Zinfandel grape with a lot of nuance. And I feel really lucky to be able to make this wine at the Hall facility in St. Helena, because we just have an incredible facility and I'm able to be very gentle and very precise in my winemaking.
Well, it is gorgeous and really does have a tender touch, but big expression. And I love it. It's beautiful. Thank you for bringing this great Old Vine Vineyard site into the program.
Thanks, Ian.
Pleasure. Well, we on quite a route here, getting to now move our discussion to one of my great friends, Clay Moritzen. How are you, Clay?
Doing great.
Fantastic. Anytime I get to speak to Clay is a good day. Where am I catching you today, buddy?
I am hiding out in the living room. So if you hear any screams from the background, I'm just hoping my kids haven't fallen down the stairs or something.
Well, you know what that's all about, man. Well, thanks for being a guest on this program. And why don't you tell us a little bit about Moritzen? I got a little slideshow to kind of back us up. And we'll start off with that and take us in as we head towards tasting the 2018 Rock Pile.
Yeah, well, first I want to say it's such an honor to be included on this panel with some just amazing winemakers, some wineries that I grew up huge fans of. So really just honored to be a part of this group. Here you kind of see a little bit of our history. On the left is myself with our winemaker at the winery, Emma, who's a huge part of everything that we do. And then at the right, you see, I chose this picture specifically because in the background behind the woman on the horse, you can actually see a vineyard located in where is now our rock pile vineyard. And this picture was taken in 1912. And it illustrates how long my family's been farming in that area. We homesteaded our rock pile property in 1868 and planted vines shortly thereafter and have been growing grapes in the rock pile region for 7 generations and 150 something years now. So we've been doing it a while.
Amazing. Today we're tasting the 2018 Rock Pile. And in fact, the Rock Pile that I have is the Rock Pile Ridge Vineyard.
Yes, sir.
And how many Rock Pile wines do you make, Clay?
What's that? We make, we make 8 different Zinfandels at the winery, depending on the vintage. When you're committed like the other wineries are to making single vineyard, wine. Sometimes things happen that you may not be able to make that wine. But we typically make 8 different Zins, but we really focus on the single vineyard concept. So we actually make 13 different wines from our Rockpile property because we have just an unbelievable diversity of terroir up there and grow quite a few different varietals. But Rockpile is really unique. I loved hearing Allison talk about the fog in Russian River and what a benefit that is to extending the growing season. And one of the unique things that makes Rockpile so special is we don't have fog. So fog can, really be an asset, but it also can be a hindrance. And, in the somewhere in here, there's a picture of our vineyard with a lake in the background. And Lake Sonoma, while it may not look real impressive from this view, it's a fairly large body of water. It's about 2,500 surface acres, and it's extremely deep. It's over 240 feet deep at the base of the dam. And the reason that's important is because large bodies of water hold their temperature extremely well. So in the Rockpile region, which is surrounded by Lake Sonoma, you have a fairly moderate climate because of the presence of the water. But more importantly, you have absolutely no fog because that lake creates an inversion layer and it sucks the fog down. And so you have this moderate influence without the moisture. And one of the big advantages to that is that we just don't see botrytis like you normally would in other Zinfandel vineyards. We get unbelievable wind flow, get sunshine, almost all day long, and it doesn't cool down as much at night. So we like to say, how do you sum all that up, into what you're tasting in the glass? In our opinion, we just tend to get physiologic and phenolic development at earlier stages and relatively lower ripeness. Now, Rockpile does not have the low pH soils like you tend to see in Russian River. Our soils tend to be a little bit more stressed, which drives a little bit higher pH in the wines. But because we can pick them earlier, we tend to pick our wines with around, somewhere around high 6s, even low 7 grams per liter of titratable acidity. So the wines still have a freshness to them. There's a brightness, but they also come with the rusticity that you would expect, from a mountainous terrain like this.
Clay, I was teaching a wine class this morning, which I do, and I was looking at some data, and in the Chablis region in France, there are 800 hectares of Premier Cru. That's almost exactly the same size as the Rockpile appellation.
Actually, Rockpile is a lot smaller than that. I mean, don't quote my math, but 800 hectares would be right about 2,000 acres. Rockpile appellation has about 200 acres. So
planted, right?
Planted, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's fair, but it's about 1,600 total acres in size, right?
15,000 total acres in size, which I think is pretty amazing when you consider the fact there's only 200 acres planted in that 15,000 acres. And a lot of that has to do with the elevation requirement. And you have to be above 800 feet in elevation to qualify for the Rockpile AVA. So you're fairly limited in that.
When did your 18 wine release?
Let's see, this would have been released about 8 months ago. So in the late spring of 2020.
Cool. And it's currently available on the website?
It is currently available on the website. And if you come to our virtual booth, you'll see we have special flat rate shipping on all the wines currently. So,
well, great. Well, it's got those benchmark Rockpile signature spicy underbrush. It's really
the 18s were a much cooler vintage, than we've had, recently. So you really get to exhibit a little bit less of the overt ripeness and more of the subtle undertones that all great Zinfandel sites have. And there's, like you said, a spice. There's some herbal notes to it. There's terroir. I absolutely love the 18s, the softness of them.
As you should. It's gorgeous, man. Well, thank you, Clay. Good to see you again, as always. And a little view from the tasting room. Hopefully we all get to come and visit you really soon at the corner of Dry Creek Road and Lytton Springs. Thank you, buddy. Oh, and large oak uprights. I forgot. Are you using these on your Zins?
We are, yes. We just love the oxidation that occurs, through the wood, and just the amazing how much an impact, the thermal properties of wood can make on a fermentation versus stainless steel. Wood provides good insulation, so our temperature curve during our fermentation looks very different than it does in our stainless steel tanks.
Wow, that's beautiful. Well, thank you. We're going to conclude our meeting today with another classic producer farming sustainably since the 1880s. That's Martinelli, and Courtney Wagner is here on the Zoom with us. Hi, Courtney.
Hello. Hello,
How are
everybody.
you? I'm going to spotlight you now. Thank you. Thank you. Let me end my slideshow and bring you to the front here. There you are. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. And how long have you been winemaker at Martinelli?
So I was hired as an assistant winemaker in 15, and then I was promoted in 17 to winemaker.
Beautiful. Let me take that approach of getting back into the slideshow. And we're talking really pretty much as old as vines get in the Sonoma County, right? So what we're looking at?
That's so the Giuseppe and Luisa, just a little history. Everything here at Martinelli always ties back to the family. So the Martinelli family, Giuseppe and Luisa is named in honor of the first Martinellis who came and homesteaded here in 1886. Our oldest vineyard is a Zinfandel vineyard that we have, and it's called Jackass Vineyard. It was already here when Giuseppe and Luisa homesteaded, so we don't know how old that one is.
Okay.
And then we have The Hill, which is probably, I'd say, our most famous vineyard that we have. And we have some drone.
Got a little drone footage looking at that. Just this is the Jackass Hill right here.
That is Jackass Hill. We feel that it is the steepest non-terrace vineyard in Sonoma County. It is a 60-degree slope. It's pretty crazy. It is quite a sight. Lee Martinelli Sr. still farms it at 81 years old and takes his track out there.
Young.
So it's pretty amazing. So that's our Forestville Ranch. So you can see the vineyards around there. That's on Martinelli Road, located just down from Hartford. Behind me actually is a Jackass Hill vineyard. No, this is Jackass Hill vine that was damaged and we had to take it out, but it was so cool that we decided to have it here in our tasting room so you can see how gnarly it is. Now the Giuseppe and Luisa, they are from the clones from our Jackass Vineyard and our Jackass Hill sites. So it is amazing that we can have those two heritage clones together. We brought it here it's actually grown here around the winery in Russian River Valley, and we're considered in the neighborhood called Santa Rosa Plain. So I know if other people have been to other Russian River type panels, but we have this initiative called the Neighborhoods because it's such a large AVA talking about the different areas in Russian River. Wood Road, where Jeff was talking earlier, is actually right behind us and in the neighborhood. And then Olivet is also very close to us also. So this area that we're in, the Santa Rosa Plain, has proven to be a really ideal site for Zinfandel. The label, everybody asked me about the crazy label. That is the original label that you could buy. Apparently there was some salesman who came around and you could buy these labels, and they used to buy it and get it printed up, and that's what they used. So that's where it comes from, is the original label that they used to market the Zin. It wasn't called Zin at the time. We called it Claret from Jackass Vineyard and Jackass Hill. And that's why that label looks the way that it does, in honoring the heritage of the Martinelli family.
That's cool. How long ago did you put Zinfandel on the label? Was that like a 1980s thing, or?
Yeah, this 1999, I believe, is when they started doing that, when they got the first Giuseppe and Luisa off there. I know the old ones all say California Claret on it. So those are the really old ones. And then For a long time, Jackass Hill actually went to William Sellium, and it was listed as the Lino Martinelli Vineyard. So if you've ever seen some of those really old William Sellium labels that have that on there, that's where that came from. That's actually Jackass Hill.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, we're tasting the 2019 wine. And my gosh, when was this released?
This was released about 2 weeks ago as an early release for us. We're really proud of it. We actually, hot off the press, yesterday found out from Venice Media, Antonio Scaloni, tasted with him, and it got a 95. So we're really happy and proud of this wine. It shows taking old clones, what old clones can do to make it amazing.
Yeah,
make it amazing wine.
Yeah, it's definitely got, I mean, the style here is a really ripe and rich and decadent style. And you play on multiple different levels with the fruit ripeness and the low yield and the definition of that place. And you go from kind of an almost an Amarone type of an aromatic with this really low production, super ripe fruit. Always a heavyweight and always kind of the benchmark for Zinfandel and potential in ripeness of flavor and ripeness of character. I hope you don't mind that description.
But it's balanced, right? It doesn't.
Oh, it's delicious.
It's always making it balanced.
Yeah, I mean, that's the artisan part of the job, right? Is to take these massive features and to make it and to turn it into a gorgeous wine that is also, very consistent every year. The site produces this lavish wine that I think a lot of people use as kind of like, the benchmark of where Zinfandel can go.
Thank you.
Yeah, super, super beautiful. And absolutely a tremendous holding, a very important vineyard site, and rock pile, and we've got rock pile, we've got Russian River, we've got all these wonderful zones, and each one of them have unique characteristics. While Zinfandel is the common thread, the place that is really steering these flavors, these profiles, are the unique hills and the unique things that each of these wine producers are bringing to the equation. Not only their own philosophical ideas, their training, their background, but their goals. And that's why, Zinfandel can cover quite a nice spectrum and yet unite around this very high quality presentation that is unlike almost any other wine presented in California, and why I personally think that Zinfandel is such a great ambassador for California wine, because it is absolutely the storyteller of place. I think I have used my time, and I want to thank everyone here. If anyone wants to conquer any of the questions or have any comments, we have a little extra time to be able to do that, but I thank you for letting me speak.
Thanks for having us, Ian. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ian. Great session. We will be looking forward to coming back shortly. We've got a great next Meet the Maker session with single vineyards from the Dry Creek Valley. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back. Okay, everybody, we are back. Really enjoying ZinEX virtual festival today. So many great wines, so many great winemakers and producers participating. Thank you, everybody. And we're really excited for the next Meet the Maker session, which is going to be all about single vineyard wines from the Dry Creek Valley. And it's our privilege to have as our moderator today, Chris Sawyer. So I'm going to throw it right to you, Chris, let you guys get started and talk about 4 great wines.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you, Becky, for having me. I'm a huge Zap fan, and I am super sad that we can't all be together. So let's bring wine country to you. That's the whole idea. And to be really honest, when Becky called me, she said, Chris, we really want you to do a couple of these. And, I know you want to pick some, but what do you want? I said, you got to give me Dry Creek. I'm sorry, you just got to give me Dry Creek. You know, I grew up in Sonoma County. I watched Dry Creek grow as an area. I am very lucky to have followed a lot of these brands for so long. And, you know, just knowing these people. For me, I call Dry Creek Valley Little Italy, because a lot of the names there, they've got an I or an O at the end, like Sagacio. Ever hear of them? Raffanelli. You know, you got to feel Italian when you go there. The Pedroncellis, you know. But the thing is that it is so rustic and wonderful there. And it has a very interesting scope too. I did bring a big AV system. So I just brought this cool map that the Dry Creek Valley vendors actually produce. And you can kind of see here that it actually does, it's not a straight line going up and down like Napa Valley is, it goes like this. And so it really starts up at the top, which is the northwest point, and goes down to the southeast point, which is Healdsburg right here. So it's a big valley going this way. And on the other side near Highway 101 is Geyserville and all those little areas there. But this is its own little area. When I was a kid, Lake Sonoma really wasn't there. And that's the part you guys just saw the great show on Rockpile. Rockpile's right above that. And right here, Lake Sonoma really wasn't a big thing yet. The dam was built right around the time that the appellation was made in 1983. This is a very interesting area because it's about 20 miles from the ocean. So we think about Russian River, you just had Jeff Stewart on, a great Russian River producer. But the fact is that the wind from the ocean is the key to this place. It's a very important part of that because it's hot during the day, but it cools down in the evenings, and that preserves that great fruit flavor profile that we're going to explore in a few minutes here. And then also the other thing is that it just has very unique soils. And I think that, you know, when I was a kid growing up, going to this area, there were a lot of prune trees, you guys. Prune trees were in, you know, that was a commodity that people really lived off of, is prune trees. But the one thing that was there too, to kind of offset that, there was cattle, there was fruit trees, there were vines. And these vines were usually just made for making the household wines. But those vines, if they could only talk, could tell some stories about the change of this area. And these wineries were key producers that made that change happen. So I'm going to just introduce them real quick. We've got Brandon Lapidus from Armida. Brandon, yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you.
We're going to talk about his amazing maple vineyard designate here. And we're going to do this order. I'll explain it in a minute too. We've got Montes Reese, and she is the great winemaker from the legendary Pedroncelli winery. You know, just over 90 years of experience in making wines. This family is the real deal. Founded in 1927. Tim Bell is over to the right there. Tim Bell, hello, Dry Creek Vineyard. I've known Tim for a long time. When he was back at Cundy, got to Dry Creek. We have a ton of fun together. I love this man, and we're gonna have some fun with him later. And Andy Robinson. Andy is the man. You know, he's taken the Sagacio brand. He's the winemaker there. And Sagacio, to me, with Pete and Ted, and I mean, such a great brand that really has made such a big difference in Sonoma County. And that family means it. And we're going to talk about a very special kind of the soil type there that is so interesting. That's the Cortina soil type. And then also for Tim, I'll show his too. This is going to be the amazing Wallace Ranch. And believe me, I talked to Don Wallace about this. I know the inside scoop on this. You're going to find it out too. So without further ado, because we don't have that much time. I wish we had an hour and a half, but we don't. Next time, right, Becky? But right now, I want to get right into this. The reason I decided to go in this order, it's going to go Brandon to Mortiz, then we're going to drop down to Andy, and then we're going to go to Tim. The reason for this is the age of the vines. The valley is so great, and I think that we also know that there's a composite soil there because the water used to rush through there before the dam was made. So there's a very compacted soil that covers the major part of the valley floor. But these vineyards are in very special areas where they're sandier or rockier soils. So that's what makes these vineyard designates so special. They're just different from the valley floor stuff. So that's why they have earned their ways into these bottles. And we're so lucky to be able to show them off here. So Brandon, here we go right into Armida Wines. You know how much I love this brand. Maple Vineyards, located, just to give you guys a scope here, Dry Creek Road that goes right into Dry Creek, goes all the way down to the, from Healdsburg to the dam. That's one thing, but you can also go past that on Highway 101 and get on Lytton Springs Road. You guys might remember this brand called Ridge, which is on Lytton Springs Road. If you go on Lytton Springs Road and hit Dry Creek, you're pretty much right near Maple Vineyard. So tell us a little bit about this vineyard. And I mean, what is it, 26 acres, Brandon?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's about 26 acres. I kind of have the little map right here. Just like Chris said, yeah, right where the corner of Dry Creek Valley and Lytton Springs meet. And so the oldest vines planted there were in 1910. So we're hitting 110 years old. But the rest of the vineyard wasn't all planted at that time. So the average age of the vines is about 90 years old, all dry farmed. And getting back to Chris, what you were saying about the soil, this is a really unique site where the soil out there is extremely sandy. So if you went out there right now, after we've had a few inches of rain, you wouldn't get really any mud on your boots at all. It's actually, most of that water has actually drained through that sand all the way down. And this really allows those old vines to dig their roots 30, 40, sometimes feet down into that real sandy soil, allows them to get what drinks they kind of can in the spring. But then it also is kind of the concentrating factor when they start to struggle in July, August, September, when we're going to pick them. These vines just don't have any more water in their water table. It kind of tricks them into believing that they're just not going to survive this year. They try to really actually focus a lot of their energy on their babies, on their seeds. And fortunately for us, those seeds are covered by grapes. And so those skins will actually develop a few more phenolics into them. You'll get a little bit more color. You'll get a little bit more structure out of the wine. And that's why kind of places like Maple are really special. And even though these are old vines, they're actually not struggling as much as other old vineyards. We'll actually still get sometimes 3.5 tons per acre out at this vineyard, which is surprising. We'll have another vineyard maybe 3 miles away that will only get about 1.5 to 2 tons. And then the secret really to this wine is the fact that usually with single vineyard wines, you only have one shot at a specific block, one tank of wine. We're fortunate enough to get about 60% of those 26 acres of maple. And so I try not to just pick it all in one day. What I try and do is just pick over about a 2-week span. So I'll actually try and pick something maybe like about a week before I think it's optimally ripe. And then about a week later, try and go into about 7 or 8 different tanks, including open top tanks, some closed top tanks, and try and almost create as many different flavors as I can out of the vineyard. So then when I go to create the wine and blend the wine, what I'm really trying to do is kind of pick my favorite 40 barrels out of 100 barrels of maple vineyard. Those will go into the single vineyard and the rest go into our Dry Creek blend. So it's kind of almost an anomaly that it is a single vineyard wine, but I'm actually afforded to be able to do this much blending with it.
That's awesome. You know, the wine smells amazing. It's got the blue fruit, but when you and I talked the other day, you pointed out a very good point in here, that cranberry. Cranberry is a Dry Creek little signature thing, you guys. Definitely cranberry and definitely cherry too. There's a lot of cherry components there, but this has got it on the nose. It's such a sultry wine. I mean, it's sexy, you guys. Hey, Valentine's Day is coming up. What's up with this? You know, but you know, it just really has a feel to it, but it has that sense of sight. And I think that one of the great things you just said there, average age 90 years old. Yeah, I mean, like these vines, if they could talk, they would tell us the whole story of how Dry Creek Valley came to be so cool. You know, I just think it's a great site. It's very close to Moritzon's Vineyard, or their little site right there too. So for those of you that kind of are driving by there, even though Armida's winery is actually off of West Side Road down the road, or actually that part of the area, you know, it's there. So it's a special vineyard designate, and you guys have done such a great job with this. The rest of the fruit goes into the different programs, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And just to like speak on your history real quick, I always kind of love to think of myself as a winemaker during these prohibition times about 100 years ago, that I'm some sort of outlaw winemaker and that the police are always kind of after me. But that's just me imagining out in the vineyard.
Love it. Well, thank you, Brandon. We'll get back to you. Hopefully we'll have enough time to talk about a little food pairing here with this one too. Next up, Matisse, here we go. When we think about Pedroncelli, number one thing I think about, mother clone. Mother clone. Got to have the mother clone. We all talk about the mother clone. That Pedroncelli found this one vineyard. They found that mother clone. They isolated it. They did so great. But this is the Bushnell Vineyard. What's the difference here? Tell us a little bit about this and how this became a vineyard designate that's bottled by itself.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the introduction. I love it. Our mother clone is our flagship wine here in Pedroncelli. The vines were planted in 1927, the same year as the winery was established. But this Bushnell lot was planted in the 1940s, also belonging to the Pedroncelli family for generations, but they use bad wood from the mother clone, from their own Zinfandel already planted. So you can say that they're all relative to the same vines that we had before, but the age for these vines are from the 1940s, although later on some were replanted on the late 1990s. So the average year, I will say, of these vines is about 40 years old. Okay. Bushnell Vineyard, if you come from Hillsburg to Lake Sonoma, is on your right side, past the general store, if you know the location of it. And you cannot see the vines from the road. They're up in a hill in a flat area. And it's a very particular lot compared with the ones that we have here in the home range, that they're very rocky, in a very rocky soil. This lot the soil is very sandy, some clay on it. So it makes it a different profile from the Zinfandels that we have here in the home range next to our winery. The reason why Pedroncelli made this single lot Zinfandel is because it really shows different flavor profiles from our other Zinfandels. I have the lack of experiment with different yeasts with this lot to try to find something that makes this Zinfandel a little enhance all those flavors that are already different. And I came out with this beautiful match of isolated yeast from Barolo grapes in Italy. It was a very rare, and I spent literally 3 years till I found those yeast. And I only use them in this wine. And it's they so cool. really shows up the profile. It's a really weird combination, Barolo yeast using in Zinfandel, but it really works very well. You have a huge spice profile pop up in this wine. And that's the main characteristics of this wine, spice. Yeah. We call it the spice bomb.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that it just has that, kind of a little bit higher elevation. Yes. The woods that are around there, it has this very savory kind of forest floor kind of note. I think I mean, what I want with this right now is some lamb. Give me a lamb meatball. And give me some of this. I'm on board right now. Pedroncelli, Italiano, your Barolo yeast. Of course, it's a brilliant idea on your behalf.
Yeah. Thank you. I try many other yeasts, but that was the one that make the deal with this one. And I hope we can talk later on about food pairings because I got a lot of them with it.
Oh, good. No, I think that's great. But so everyone, just so you know, this is a little bit higher elevation. Yes. It's a few hundred feet up there, but it's off the valley floor. And once again, a very important thing that Montez just said was about the sandy soils. Sandy soils, the tectonic plates out in the ocean were pushed up, and that's what makes Sonoma County so interesting, is we have tons of sandy soils, and they're not just from the beaches or anything like that. They're actually been pushed up, and that's what our mountains are made out of. So, you know, it's a very interesting site here. And I think that we do have a common thread here with sandy soils that we're going to be talking about here. So thanks, Montes. We'll come back and we will do a little food pairing with you, of course. Moving on to Andy. Andy, you know, the Sagacios. I mean, they're just so Dry Creek, so Alexander Valley, so Sonoma County. I mean, just a great place. This story of the Cortina, it really has more to do with the soil and a specific site there that's a little bit past the general store, right near Unti Winery, correct?
Exactly. It's exactly south of Unti Winery and adjacent to it, just bordering it on the south end. And it extends from the Dry Creek Road towards the creek bed. And as you go that way, you're going to cross like a little drainage ditch that basically bisects the vineyard. And this wine that we have here, the Cortina, comes from the parcels between the drainage ditch and the creek. And that's what I think, you know, we were talking about it a little bit earlier. And if we go back to when the family found this, it was in 1955, they bought the land. 15 years later, they decided to plant grapes. And so in the early 70s, you have Ted and his dad planting and budding this vineyard themselves with a couple other folks. And that was one of my, you know, favorite stories, because the whole thing is, if you look at the end post, the idea was that you would, if you were really brave and you were confident, you would put your initials in the end post of the rows that you T-budded.
Oh, cool.
And that way, you know, here we are 40 years later, 50 years later, and we know who did the best job. So it's pretty cool. And,
like that.
You know, one things that we talk about with old vines and that how did they get old? They had to be good when they were young. So if you move through the 40 years here, the family, you know, they were standing in that vineyard in 1997. And at that point it was going to White Zin and it was being sold off. And there was just an aha moment that when the Sagacios decided to take a more serious approach, they walked into the Cortina Vineyard, and Chen's Vineyard it's called actually, and said, well, this has to stop, because 1998 was a rough year for a lot of the industry around here, but that was the year that gave rise to this bottle of Cortina. And I think what it was pursuing a different side of the Zinfandel. And what we do with this is you know, based on that kind of delineation of the soil. And again, we talk about the sandier soils, the more alluvial soils closer to the creek bed. We just really strive to pursue the elegance in Zin of Dry Creek. And I think that comes across in that fine tannin finish, a little bit of fruit accent and really elongated fine tannins on the finish.
I like the story too that you told me about this, Andy, where, you know, it was Pete and Ted and Phil Freeze, who's like the great vineyard manager guy, you know, from Dry Creek Valley, are walking through there, and Phil like looks down and he says, wait a second, this is a very different kind of sand here, sandy soil. We need to do something with this. You can't sell this for White Zinfandel anymore. It's not going to happen. That was a great story. And I want to say one of the things that helped preserve, and you bring this up, Andy, and it's a really important point, and we'll talk about it also in Napa Valley, what we'll do next, but White Zinfandel, come on, it saved these vines, you guys. This is crazy talk, but it did save these vines. And if it didn't, they wouldn't be there anymore, you know. And I think that was a great thing for the Sagacios to keep that property, sell it off for as long as they could until Phil and them came to this idea like, damn, we need to bottle this stuff by itself. And it just became so interesting. But this really has an amazingly, there's a chalky kind of note to it. There's a lot of little minerality to it. It has a really nice thing that I get out of older vine, you know, Zinfandels. And that is like, it's usually a nectarine pit, you know, just like where you tear it off and it's got the little kind of strings coming out of it, but you don't want to cut that off if you really want tannins in there too. Right. But it's just so good. There's a freshness to it. There's a great site specific thing. And there's that signature, you know, Dry Creek Valley, all about it. You also make one smaller batch of this, don't you? A little called Sand Point.
We do. We only do it in years where we feel like it where we obviously we have enough. We have to have enough. So it has to be a year where we have a yield where we can pull that little bit off, and we maybe make 100 barrel or 100 cases of what we call Sandpoint. Well, what we'd love to call Sandpoint, we actually just called it Chen's Vineyard, but it's the wine that from my time there, when I started in 2004, 2003, the 2004 Sandpoint was the one that we just said, man, if we could only bottle this on its own once, that would make us happy. And we did it in 2017. We
Love
set
it.
that a little bit apart.
I think I just need to come and taste that stuff. I think all of us need to come and visit you. And you can visit all these wineries too, you guys. That's a very important point here. But before we finish off, we got to talk about Dry Creek Vineyard, because this is one of my favorite vineyards. And we know that this is one of the legacies of it becoming an appellation, is David Stair. And Tim, you've been working with these vineyards. This is a very special one. This is the Wallace Ranch. This is across the street from the winery. This is something that Don, in his wisdom, decided to really kind of plant this, but using some of the older cuttings from Dry Creek to preserve the integrity of Dry Creek. Tell us a little bit about this real quick.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So this is probably the youngest vineyard being featured here, maybe, but I wanted to talk about it because this budwood was a kind of an interesting story. Back in the late 80s, the winery was looking to plant some vineyards and was unhappy with the Zinfandel clonal selections that were available commercially. And so ended up sourcing this budwood from a vineyard that it was actually near Geyserville called Mazzoni. And it was a vineyard that we didn't even really know. We don't even really know how old it was. It later was removed and replanted by a subsequent owner. But I believe Duff Bevel, our vineyard manager, talked about talking to Frank Pastore, who was kind of one of the local Sonoma legends, and had a photograph of himself in this vineyard when he was a boy in the late 20s, and it was a fully mature vineyard at that point. So, you figure it's got to be close to around the time of Prohibition or a little before that when it was planted. So, basically we've got this old vine budwood, and it was this vineyard was kind of one of those early ones of getting some really great heritage clones, historic clones into the ground. The vineyard is kind of just on the edge of what I would still consider sort of Eastern Bench land. It's just before the ground really slopes off to the lower elevation next to Dry Creek. And so some really good rocky soil there. And for me, it makes a really sort of nicely nuanced expression of Zinfandel. And it was funny you mentioned cranberry, Chris, as a hallmark of Dry Creek Zin, because I was just tasting this wine before that we came on today, and that was my first note, was like, my wife makes this really great homemade cranberry sauce at Thanksgiving, and that was exactly what I got out of this wine.
That's fantastic. No, I mean, I think this wine is great. It's got a natural richness, but it's got that youthfulness too. And I think that this is really why I wanted to bring you up last, Tim, is just because this is the thing, is preserving the integrity of this valley is really important. And for you guys to take these old cuttings and not to go through UC Davis. And I know that Don really went through UC Davis, but he just wasn't feeling the feel. This was more of the feel of the area. And he really brought that on. And I think that when he planned this vineyard in 1994, this was really something that was very special to preserve really what Dry Creek is all about. I think we had a great time really talking about these. Becky, do we have one moment to talk about food? One moment to talk about food. Brandon, what's your favorite pairing with this amazing Armida?
For me, I love doing rosemary and lamb with it. It's just something about the savory aspects will really bring out that kind of cranberry and all that fruit flavors. I think works really well.
I love it. Montez, how about for this one, this amazing upper kind of bench kind of place?
Prosciutto.
Oh.
Anything with prosciutto, the earthiness and saltiness of prosciutto is just perfect.
Got it. Done. Sign me up. Cortina, what are we thinking here?
Well, I got to go back to the lamb that Brandon mentioned, but actually you hit it right on the head earlier with like a Moroccan lamb meatball with like a yogurt dipping sauce.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome. And finally, Tim, you got a bunch of Dry Creek Vineyard Zins that you do. How about this one? What makes it different? What do you like to eat with it?
There's a lot of things I could say, but the one top choice I would have is some chicken thighs with a nice spice rub. Maybe it has some ancho chili, a little chipotle even, and put that on the grill and mash it up with this wine.
Love it. You guys, thank you so much for being part of this. Go Dry Creek Vineyards and grow Dry Creek Valley in general. This is a great show. Thank you so much for having me on, Becky, and thank you for having me represent my great county of Sonoma County. Really appreciate that.
Chris, great job. Great panel, everybody. Thank you so much to Brandon and Tim and Monsi and Andy. It was a great panel. We're excited about all those wines and looking forward to and trying all of them. We will be taking a quick break. We're coming back actually with, again, Chris is going to do a single vineyard session on Napa County wines. So stay with us. We will be right back.
Whether you're buying property, building, or making improvements, American Ag Credit is here to help with fixed rates, variable rates, long and short-term loans. Unique solutions tailored to your unique needs. Because Ag is our middle name.
Okay, everybody, we are back. We're having so much fun at Virtual ZinEX. So many great wineries, so many great stories, and wonderful insights as well. I encourage everyone to keep enjoying these Meet the Maker sessions, but to also make sure you visit the virtual booths. There's great stuff in there. You'll hear more stories, meet more people, and learn more about America's heritage grape, Zinfandel, as well as take advantage of some awesome offers in the booths. We are back for another great session. This is going to be on single vineyard wines from Napa County. And Chris Sawyer is doing it again. So Chris, I'm going to throw to you and 4 great winemakers to talk about some selections that we're dying to hear about.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here with some amazing winemakers and amazing wineries from Napa Valley. We are not talking about Cabernet Sauvignon today, you guys. We're talking about Zinfandel, what really put Napa Valley on the map. And, I'm really excited because, as a kid driving over there with my mom when I was back in the 70s, that was pretty much the main varietal there was Zinfandel. And these 4 wineries are great examples of places and sites that have restored that integrity. And, the amazing Zinfandel vines that grew there, they were really the benchmark for Napa Valley for a long time. And you will taste it in these wines. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my panel just in the way that we're going to go. And the first one being Mike Hendry of Hendry Wines. And that's Mike and Molly. We're going to be tasting the amazing R.W. Moore Vineyard Designate, which is one of my favorites of all time and one of the most interesting ones because it's at the very southern end of Napa Valley. And we will talk about that because this is a long time ago that they were planting these grapes, you guys. It's no new stuff. They didn't go to the heat areas. They went where it grew the best. Oh, yeah. Number 2 in line would be great Josh Peebles. Josh, we're going to talk to you about this amazing Morrisoli Vineyard Designate that really helped put your Elise winery on the map originally. And this is in Rutherford. We talk about the Rutherford dust. Oh, the Rutherford dust. Everyone thinks Cabernet, Cabernet, Cabernet. Guess what was there before it? Yeah, Zinfandel, you guys. Zinfandel, you bet. Number 3 is another great site. And this is the old Craft Vineyard from Bialy. My great friend, Tress Goting is here with us. And Tress and I have talked about these wines forever, but this has a special place in my heart because I really wanted Tress to talk about this one because it represents St. Helena. St. Helena. Oh, wow. Whoa. Yeah. A lot of stuff going on at St. Helena. Yeah, but actually it's where the site is. And it's actually about Mr. Kraft, Franz Kraft, who was a big deal in the old days. And we're going to talk about that and their site, which is right next to Spotswood The original Spotswood is right next to this and vice versa. So it is actually on the west side, kind of at the base of the mountain right there of Spring Mountain is where this is. And it's an old vineyard too. And last but not least is Chris Leonard. And Chris has become one of my favorite guys at Zap. I met Chris a few years ago, and I thank Becky for having Chris there at the old One Market event that we did. And I fell in love with your wines, Chris, and I was super excited you were going to be on here. And this is a very interesting one. So we're going down the valley. We're talking about from the south to the north, but then we're going up in the hills. This is Charles Valley. Oh yeah, we're going out there, you guys. So get ready, put your seatbelts on, get your glasses ready. Let's taste and enjoy this as we go along. Mike Hendry, one of my favorite guys. I remember a year ago that we went out and had sushi right after one of these flight events, and it was really good sushi, Mike. And we really need that sushi after having a really intensive time. But it was really good. R.W. Moore, between you and Bialy, it's the designate that I think of all the time when I think about the southern part of Napa Valley. Tell everyone where this site is.
So I really describe it as sort of the northeast corner of the city of Napa. It's really elevation wise, I bet it's not more than 100 feet above the river. And it's just sort of at the base of Mount George and the kind of the northern side of Coombsville.
Yeah, that's great. You know, you've been working with this vineyard. I mean, your family owns it, and you've been farming it. You know, it's an old vine vineyard. What the heck were these people thinking planting it there of all places?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting. This is the only really old vineyard that I work with. And when I started working with it, I wanted to, it made me think a lot about the people that had gone before. And I've been listening in on these talks. And it's interesting that a bunch of these old vineyards have been sort of, you know, shepherded by one family since the 1800s, but it's actually really chaotic at the Moore Vineyard. So we know it was planted by Pleasant Ashley Stevens, but he actually owned it for 2 years only. So even though he planted it, he never would have picked a grape. Between 1881 and 1938, which is 57 years, it changed hands 15 times.
Whoa.
So in those 15 times, it sold for $10,000 twice and $10 3 times. It also, and this is one of my favorites, it was actually sold for just love and affection once. So technically the whole property changed hands for no money at all. And there were also 2 repossessions and bankruptcies in there. So it's a really, really turbulent history. We don't talk much about Philip Phillips, but he owned it for almost 50 years and starting just after Prohibition. And I suppose he had a lot to do with keeping it through there. But there was, I mean, when Zinfandel was first being widely planted, there was a big boom in Zinfandel. And I think this vineyard was probably first planted in the 1880s, the early 1880s.
Amazing. What is the soil type there?
It's a loamy, a gravelly loam. Really, it's a sort of the decomposition of a volcanic rhyolitic rock. The surface is this gravelly loam, and then as you get deeper, it just gets to more sand and gravel, but it's a fairly deep soil.
You know, it's such a complex nose. I love it, and it's got an earthy quality to it, but it's got a lot of this fruit, and it's all kind of just dazzling around inside your nose. And it's not like one thing, it's everything. You know, it's like this wild berry, there's the plum, there's a lot of things going on, but there's also that kind of, you know, there's that nice natural tension with good acidity. And I think that's really, that site is a special site for acidity.
Yeah, and actually this, of the years that I've made the wine, this wine, it started with the highest TA of all of them. So something for me about 2018 that also started with a higher level of acidity.
Oh, great. Well, that's great. We'll come back to you because I do want to ask you about your food pairing with this. And you know how much I love this. I'm just glad to have this and to represent this amazing vineyard. So that once again, that's the W.R. Moore Vineyard that's planted in 1905 is what it says on here. But it is a very special vineyard. And think about that. As we go up the valley right now, think about where this vineyard is. And, you know, going into Tress right now, Tress, you work with this vineyard, you work with the RW more. I might have tasted yours before I tasted Mike's actually, but the fact is that you guys are so good at, you know, you love Zinfandel, Bob Bialy. You know, I know you're out there, Bob, listening to us right now. Love you, man. But you know, there's a family passion here for these old vines and preserving these vines. And it's a very important thing for you and the family to do. This is a special one. This is an interesting one that we're going to get to in a minute. But before we get there, we're going to go to the Morosoli, because Morosoli is actually, as we're driving up north, this is what you'd come to first before you get to St. Helena. So this is the Morosoli. This is Rutherford. And Josh, you know, this is a brand that really started because of this winery, or this vineyard. Sorry.
The very first wine ever made for Elise back in 1985 was Morosoli Zinfandel. And so it's kind of near and dear to the core foundation of the brand. And, you know, when we were lucky enough to purchase the Elise winery back in 2018, you know, this was the first meeting we knew we had to have. And it was great to spark that relationship with Gary and Chris, and you're, you know, chatting with 4th and 5th generation farmers. There's that kind of instant weight that we're being entrusted with this iconic site, and our number one job is to not screw it up. And so, you know, I think going back with our winemaker Russell Bevan, you know, this is a vineyard that he lusted after even as a consumer, you know, 30 years ago. And so it's really great that we get to play with a section of the vineyard planted in the late 1880s. It's the oldest part, dry farmed, head pruned. And, you know, this is one of those vineyards that we can't be heavy handed. We kind of have to listen to the vineyard more than we can really try to push it. And with these old gnarly vines, one day they just drop all of their leaves and say, if you want to pick me, the time is now. And I think dealing with these ancient vines, it's very different than, you know, some of the younger Cabernet plantings that are 100 yards away. And so it's been really great for us to get to know this vineyard a little more every year.
That's great. You know, what I love about it too is you get Cabernet from this vineyard too. And BV, I mean, this was BV's major go-to vineyard, and Joel Aiken out there, I know you love this vineyard too. This is a special vineyard where Cabernet really works, but this Zinfandel is way older than the Cabernet, and it is humming right now in this glass. It's really great. Give us a little comparison, because you do a Courtney Ranch too, which is just up the road, St. Helena, a little bit more elevated. Tell us a little bit about the differences in the soils between those two, and how you get what's the flavor difference there that you get?
For me, I think, you know, Morosoli is just classic Zinfandel front to back. You know, it's really just what I would consider a benchmark, even in the 20 years before we were ever working with the vineyard. Going slightly north, about 6 miles to St. Helena, we get to Courtney Ranch, another 90-plus-year-old vineyard. But I think we bring out a lot more Bing cherry and riper red fruit notes from Courtney. And that's really kind of in our 3 kind of ancient vines Zinfandels. We have Morosoli, Courtney, and Dry Creek. And we're getting hotter as we progressively go north. And I think we get a flashier sense to each one of them. And so that's kind of where I'd put Morosoli, is just that classic. For me, it's just never overdone. And going back to vineyards this old, we can't push it. You know, again, the vines just shut down. We couldn't ever make an over-extracted version of this wine just because the vines won't let us. Some of the younger plantings and other ranches, we can get a little heavy-handed if you want.
Yeah, it's really got an amazing nose on it too. I mean, it's got a very chocolatey nose, and it's so funny because we call it the Rutherford dust. We always refer to chocolates and, you know, malty things. I mean, this has got like that Whopper, like a Whopper ball. You know what those are? Right. You guys put the malt, chocolate malt. It's got it. But you're like, wow.
About 60% new French oak. So we kind of pulled from our Cabernet regime to give this vineyard all the respect it needs. So it has some Taranceau, some Darnajou, some Sylvain. You know, we're throwing pretty sexy French oak at it to kind of get to that little extra oomph on this one.
Did you hear that, everyone? Sexy. Valentine's Day coming up. Elise. There you go. Awesome, Josh. We'll get back to you in a few minutes. Speaking of sexy and old, Bialy, hey, let's go there. So Franz Kraft. This is the old Kraft. I want to talk with Franz Kraft. Tell us about Franz Kraft.
Franzi.
You know, this is such a cool story, and the history of this vineyard is pretty neat. So yeah, we'll focus on that because this gentleman by the name of Franz Croft planted this vineyard in St. Helena. So just to get more specific about where it sits, as you mentioned, it's right next to the Spotswood Winery. So if people are familiar with Napa Valley Cabernets and vineyards of sort, it's right there. So it's at the very western edge of St. Helena at the base of the Mayacamas Range. And in fact, the original cellar that Franz made his wine in the 1890s is still there, but it's on the Spotswood property. But the original property consisted of the Craft Vineyard and the Spotswood Vineyard. And now it's split up, but that old stone winery still exists, and Spotswood uses it now. So pretty neat. And Franz was actually a winemaker. He planted this vineyard in 1860 or in the 1860s, and then replanted it in 1890s because of phylloxera. But in that interim, he was making the wine, and what I've read in archives of St. Helena, he was actually a big shot, considered a big shot winemaker in St. Helena, which is pretty crazy to imagine before things like the Wine Spectator and publications and vehicles and hot water and electricity and such. Pretty difficult tasks to pull off. So it's really neat to think of that as a winemaker in St. Helena having a reputation. So what happened with the vineyard was it was under Croft's ownership for decades and decades, and went through a couple of different ownerships. And then in the 1960s, the Harts purchased the property, Bill and Margie Hart, who own it today, and they didn't really buy the property for the vineyard, but they never really tore it out. It just kind of was there. They didn't really utilize it. It needed some TLC. So they called Bob Bialy and Bill Pease, who's an excellent vineyard manager up in this area, and asked for some help in restoring the vineyard. So what Bob and Bill did was they came in and assessed the property and decided that it needed drainage, first of all. So they put French tiles in, and then they spent years getting back the goblet shape of the old head train vines by pruning. That took a while to kind of get those back to proper pruning. And then soil amendments, replantings, all of these things. They kind of just brought this vineyard back to life. And that was in 2006. And then that was in 2002. And then in 2006, our first vintage at Robert Bialy came about. So it took about 4 years for us to get that up to working condition. And here we are. And it's such a beautiful wine because of that location, that gravelly loam soil, that well drained is part of that alluvial fan that comes off the Mayacamas Range, and hot weather up in St. Helena, old vines in. It loves it.
It's the real deal. I mean, it fascinates me too, because you've got Petit Syrah there too, and you guys, you bottle it there. And it just was what St. Helena was. I mean, everyone thinks that St. Helena, Cabernet, especially Spotswood, because actually that's the end of what we'd call the Rutherford bench that goes from it goes from Oakville all the way down to St. Helena. And it's that bench that sits at the base of the mountain there, but it's not flat. It's always kind of curving down a little bit. I think that's what makes this vineyard so special. And, these old farmers, they knew what they were doing. I mean, especially with Zinfandel. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. And the fact that they are still alive, these vines have outlived generations of people. They are very important vines to us. And the fact that you've been able to capture this inside the bottle since 2006, it's a benefit to all of us. But, it's got the sexy thing going too. It is a big, ripe, juicy, elegant, sophisticated kind of wine that really just jumps all over your mouth. And you're just loving this. I mean, it's just a fun wine. But I think that this is just a great signature wine for Napa Valley. Like all these are the one where the people that were there was no cab, you guys. There wasn't any cab. You know, Chardonnay wasn't in. You know, these are the vines that they had, and they are still alive. So we'll come back to food pairings in a second, because I know you're really good with food too, Tress, and you and I eat and drink well together. Speaking of great guys, Chris Leonard, if you guys do not know this guy's
I think it's so great, Chris. I don't. Thank you. I appreciate it.
get to know this guy. This guy knows what he's doing, and he's a great guy. So, Chris, we talked about, we went up the valley. We had a great tour of the valley. Now we're going somewhere else. We're going up the mountain. We're not going up the Mycomas. We're going up the Vaca Mountain. We're going up there to Childs Valley. Childs Valley is a very different area. And, you know, right here on the map, you can see where we went from Coombsville down here. And then we went to Rutherford right there. And then we went to St. Helena here. Now we're going way straight up here to the mountain part up there in right outside of Lake Berryessa and all those kinds of things up there, the big waterways. What's this area like? I mean, if we were to drive up there, what would we be seeing?
Yeah, thanks for being an ambassador for Childs Valley. I love Childs so much. To me, it's an opportunity to have more of an old world wine come out of Napa because of that climate up there. So if you go up to the eastern mountains, and you know where Rutherford is, head up east, it's 1,000 foot up. So it's a super narrow valley. I mean, it's drop dead gorgeous. You know, the trees have, you know, Spanish moss hanging from them. There's cattle ranches there still. It's a very, very narrow valley. It's almost like a canyon. It's 1,000 feet up. So you're lost. It's rustic. It's in the middle of nowhere. I think that's why there's lower foot traffic, because, you know, you have to get off the beaten path. And that's, you know, how I wound up out there. 2007, saw it for the first time, and making fruit off it since 2014. So I think the terroir of Childs is unique for Napa in that I love the cold nights. So having such cold nights, I believe they're probably 5 degrees colder than the valley floor. It gets so cold up there. It's the only place I've ever seen the Milky Way in my life. I mean, you can look at the stars, it's completely clear, and it's freezing. It's beautiful. And those cold nights, I think, are what allow Childs to be more feminine in nature in terms of its wine. It's very elegant.
Yeah.
It is rustic, it's coarse because of some other terroir elements, but those cold nights keep it restrained and very beautiful when it's in the glass.
I agree.
Cold nights, and I also say, I think I love the wind that comes down from Pope Valley. So Pope Valley, just being up valley from Childs a little bit in those mountains, if you're out there farming at 2 or 3 p.m., you get that wind come straight through Pope, down through Childs, and that really, you know, prevents sunburn. So thank God we get nice clean fruit because of this wonderful wind that comes through. So I think you get clean fruit without sunburn, and you get cold nights, you get a feminine product that's drop dead gorgeous. It is full of cherry like Zinfandel has, but it's spicy and pomegranates and black cherry and fragrant, and it's a very gorgeous situation. So thanks to that terroir, I believe that the cold nights do that for us.
Yeah, you know, I get a wild kind of sage-like character out of it too. It makes me want to do a really like Cornish game hen with sage like underneath it, and just roasting it slowly and just having this wine just sounds good to me, you know.
Sounds ridiculous.
It just sounds great. It's called Rust Ridge. What's the Rust Ridge name for?
Yeah, really honored to be part of Rust Ridge, using that fruit, farming that fruit. It was planted in the early 70s, and I love that it was planted as a Riesling vineyard. So in the day, right, it was planted for Riesling on St. George rootstock. So you have a lot of classic Napa Valley elements there. It was grafted over in the late 90s as Zinfandel, and I mean, all these complex flavors come from the roots, right? But and so looking at St. George, looking at Riesling, and what I love about the whatever the clone is, and I'm sorry that I actually can't. I don't want to specify what the exact clone of this is. I was grafted in the late 90s because I wasn't there and I haven't got all those details yet. But I can tell you that it is the smallest berry and loosest cluster Zinfandel I work with. It does look more like Pinot to me than a cylindrical Zinfandel. So I think there may be, all you guys on this talk right now, I mean, I think we could have a discussion about like, is there boron in that land up there in Childs, and does that have an effect on berry size? I think that could be arguable. So if you consider that maybe the St. George rootstock helps decrease berry size, you know, maybe this clone of Zinfandels up there is a smaller clone.
That's really cool.
That could, you know, create a smaller berry and therefore more skin tannin. And I think it's a great opportunity to produce a more rustic, old world style of wine. And for our applications at Leonard Wine Company, that's what we go after, is a leaner wine. And Childs Valley gives us fragrance and also core structure on the finish. And
You got it.
Really happy to be
Awesome.
part of it.
Yeah, I love it. So we've got just a couple minutes here. So let's fire away at our favorite pairings with these wines. Because remember, hey, you guys, it's 2020. Was it a good year? Not really. But did we all become chefs at home? Yes, we did. Damn straight. You know, Mike, what do you like to drink with this amazing, the Mike and Molly's Henry's RW Moore? What's your go-to here?
I think it's hard to go wrong with a really good grilled pork chop. You know, preferably on a wood fire. Love it.
Love it. I want it. I love it. I might throw a little bit of herbs on that too. Josh, you've got the Morrisoli, you know, a little Italiano. I don't know. What are you thinking?
I mean, I'd say a loved one, but you know, that's just being romantic. But you know, I think any sausages we can grill. Going back, he was going to say pork chop, but I don't want to say twice. So yeah, throw some sausages on a great outdoor grill. Can't go wrong.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good one, especially, you know, I've got some venison sausage that I think it could even hold up to that. Tress, you know, you and I, we've gone to Telluride. We've done a lot of kooky things together. You know, what would you pair with this one?
Cassoulet all the way, buddy. Yeah. Can
baby.
you imagine that?
Talking casserole, you know, cassoulet, you know, let's do this. You
That's
know,
right.
cooking it slowly. That's a perfect thing to be doing right now, especially all of us sitting at home too often. But we all need to be going to the little shows and the booths too, so don't forget that. But Chris, you know, following up with you, the Leonard Wine Company, you know, what would you do with this?
Yeah, I would just do game. Definitely, you know, earthiness, get the game in there. And if you could do something fatty like lamb, that's a very low pH wine. And so that acid there will cut that fat in the lamb and it's earthy.
I love it. I love the earthiness. I might do a little risotto with that one too. You know, a nice risotto with some wild mushrooms. I think it's that earthiness. It's that mountainside. It's great. I think you've got a lot of stuff going on. These are fantastic wines, you guys. Thank you so much. And for all of you out there, you know, you got to understand, you can't come to the Zap thing right now. We have to come to you, and you have to go to the booths where these guys are represented and have some fun with them, because I'm going to be having fun with them. I'm going to drink these wines, of course. I'm going to share them with other people, but that's the whole spirit right now, is to bring Zap home to you and to bring these great producers to your houses as well. I think this was a great show, and you guys really represent Napa so well. And I think it's really important for everyone out there to remember Napa Valley, how it got its start was not based on Cabernet. It was based on Zinfandel and Petit Syrah and these great, amazing old world blends that came over from these crazy people that planted these grapes a long time ago, and the preservation of them is super important to all of us.
Absolutely. Well said.
Well said, Chris. Another great session. I love how you grounded us in the origins of winemaking and going back in time to Zinfandel in Napa County and in that area. And it's a perfect lead in to the next Meet the Maker session, which we'll go to break and we'll come back, because we are going to return with a special session on Italian Zinfandel wine, and a great background and origin story that goes with it. So thank you so much, Chris. Awesome job. Great insights and information from Josh and Chris Leonard and Mike and Tress. Thank you guys so much. You're the rock stars, the winemakers. We'll see you in your booths. Everybody watching, make sure you do visit the virtual booths. Check out the special offers, hear about the stories and the wines, and learn more about Zinfandel, America's heritage grape. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you on the other side.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Hello, everyone. It's me, Becky Robinson from Zap. I just wanted to check in with all of you. I don't know about you, but these sessions are amazing. We learn so much every time you get a chance to talk with the winemakers and share the passion. It just is amazing to me. And I know that we're not all together, but I feel like we are when they come together and they get to have these great conversations and share them with you. So before we go off to a little bit of a different twist, I again just wanted to emphasize that the winemakers have gone out of their way to create some really neat offers for you. They're in their booths. You can continue the conversation, and we hope that you do that. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I'll be back on the other side of this to wrap things up with Sam. But in the meantime, I get the great privilege of introducing Sam, who's going to kick off this next session. And he's going to take a little trip for Zinfandel to Italy. So take it away, Sam.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Today has been amazing, and such a great selection of different wineries, 40 wineries making Zinfandel. It's an incredible aggregation of talent and wonderful selections. And I'm really thrilled because we came out of the last Meet the Maker session talking about Zinfandel as really being the true precursor to the Cabernet Sauvignon winemaking tradition in Napa County. And that in fact, it was largely Italian immigrants who brought the grape and really nurtured it and grew it and did those wines in that area. And so it's only fitting that we end the day with a Meet the Maker session with Gregorio Perucci from the Feline Winery in Puglia in Italy. And also the fact that Gregorio has stayed up until 12:15 a.m. to hang with us because he's coming in from Italy. So Gregorio, welcome to ZinEX Virtual.
Thank you. Thank you. What should I say? Good night? No, good afternoon.
Good evening. It's good afternoon in California, but I'm in New York, so we don't know what time it is. So you're in Puglia, in the heel of the boot of the Italian peninsula, yeah? And the winery is called Feline Winery.
Yeah.
And it's like Fellini, the movie maker, but with an E on the end instead of an I. And you're in Manduria, the town, which is the capital of the Primitivo grape. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And this is an area that has been a tremendous tradition of winemaking. And I believe you're the third generation in your family that's run the winery there. And so I have to ask you, I mean, we've got 39 California wine producers, wineries at the festival today and tomorrow. And yours is the 40th winery, but you're in Italy. How did you get into growing Zinfandel and making Zin in Italy?
It's like all the stories about wine, it starts by the heart, by the passion. And so I joined my family in running the winery, and Manduria is the capital for Primitivo, and has a lot of in common with California because Manduria specified on Primitivo. The only grape that was cultivated around our land was just Primitivo. And but we never got an upgrade in terms of reputation, and I didn't understand why, because the wine, the grape, it's fantastic, and we have a different expression of this grape around Manduria in terms of the location of the vineyards. Vineyards that are planted in red soil are different from the vineyards planted in the black soil or in the sand near the seaside. So I was talking with a friend of mine who lived in California, used to live over there, Lucio Gomiero, the owner of Vignalta, it's a winery in Veneto. And I asked him to bring me around to visit some producers because I would understand how to achieve the same proud that the California producer had about Zinfandel. Here we didn't care about Primitivo so much. We just made our wine, we were very proud of it, but we didn't have the emotion, the energy to point our attention on this grape in order to be more developed. And together, Lucio, and also thanks to Daryl Corti, I was introduced to the best producer that welcomed me in a very warm way. And I learned so much from them. And I would transmit this love for Primitivo for Zinfandel in my land. So I brought some cuttings from one of my favorite vineyards in California, and I grafted here. At that time, it was not sure that Primitivo and Zinfandel were the same thing. So I would experiment on by myself the differences and similarities in our vineyard. So I planted Zin in Manduria, and I was very excited about this. And I still make the wine from there, and it's really a fantastic adventure that brought me in California. Not this year, unfortunately, but promise next year I will be there at the festival with all of you to share my wine and to share the same enthusiasm.
No, it's great. And can we say how you brought the vines back from California to Italy?
Actually, you know that the recent research says, and I believe that probably the origin of both Primitivo and Zinfandel comes from Croatia, from Selena Castellansky. But, you know, the history of Zinfandel in California is strictly related to Italian work.
Yeah.
I think that in the concept of the terroir, we put everything. We put the location, the soil, composition of the soil, exposition, south, north, altitude. But we have to take care about the work of the people. And most of them were families. So it was a family business brought by Italians. And that's why I felt in love with this organization. Rebecca was so kind to admit me, I think in 1998, I don't remember exactly. And I'm so proud to be there and share my experience together, all these fantastic producers. And every year I make a kind of a small festival in this place. This is my winery. I live here in the winery. And every year I host some wonderful zin together with my Primitivo, and I show this grape varietal to all Apulian wine lovers that come to visit me.
So now you've been making Zinfandel for over 20 years in Puglia.
Yeah.
And Puglia, and specifically Manduria, the town that you are located in, is the capital of the Primitivo grape. Primitivo is everywhere, yeah? And so I have to ask you, what did the local wine growers say when you first started bringing the Zinfandel in your vineyard?
Actually, I didn't tell them at the beginning. I didn't tell them anything about this. I grafted the vines side by side with a vineyard of mine that was Primitivo, and I invited the most old and skilled grower to look at the new vineyard, at the new vines that I grafted, and asked them what kind of grape was that. And they couldn't recognize the differences. So they say, oh, that's Primitivo. And I told them that actually was Zinfandel. And they couldn't believe, because it's the vineyard, the vines are really similar. But the clone that I brought is quite different. We have most of the clone in Manduria are looser. The clone that I brought that comes from Geyserville is more tidy, more compact.
Compact. Yeah.
Yeah. And but we also have some clones like that. They are most of them are rare, but we also have some clone like that. And they were curious. People was really curious about what I was doing. Actually, it was a curiosity. Was my side of research. In the end, I think that what affects most is the location of the vineyard. So the soil in Puglia is really, really important.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the soil momentarily. People are loving hearing about Italy and Zinfandel, and in the chat of the live stream, Gregorio, there's a couple of questions. One of them is from Harold, who says, after growing California Zin with Italian Primitivo, what do you see as the main difference?
As I told you before, I just have one vineyard of Zin, and it's a clone which is tied, so it's a clone very rich. I cannot make in general comparison because I've not such great experience in Zinfandel. Most of my experience is on Primitivo. But I say that it's really similar, and even the vines in Primitivo and Zinfandel that I planted in the black soil is very dark and deep soil, alluvial. They have the same behavior. They make a lot of greenings, and the timing of the grape is quite late. So I usually we harvest 1 month after the red soil, for example.
Yeah.
So
Now,
we have wine over there.
So the other question, and I want to talk about this wine because it's great. I've been tasting it before we started the session here. Kent asked, what was the outcome of your experiments to see if Zinfandel and Primitivo are the same grape?
I don't understand. What?
Well, you did some research and experiments to go back and see how closely related Primitivo and Zinfandel were as grapes, and I think you found that they were almost the same. Yeah.
One of the biggest researcher in Italy is Professor Antonio Calò, and he was born 5 kilometers from here. He was appointed by the Italian government to make research on all the grape. He was a professor at the San Michele all'Adige Institute, which is the Italian nursery of the ancient grape varietals. And he was making research on the side of Primitivo and Zinfandel too. And he also made some research on Primitivo and Plavina. Plavina is a kind of a Plava Smali. So talking with him, he gave me this information about the similarities of Primitivo and Zinfandel. At that time, there was a great debate if they were or not the same thing. Then I came to California visiting different growers and producers, and I met Mr. Sullivan, Charles Sullivan, that brought me a great curiosity about the way that probably Zinfandel arrived in California. That involves also Primitivo. So I heard all those stuff, all those stories, and I started to make my own research on my side.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right, so let's talk about this wine because we only have a couple minutes left. Do you have a bottle there? It might show better on your screen. I have this beautiful label. There it is. It's, I'm going to get you to pronounce the name, Gregorio. What's this wine?
Zinfandel.
And I have to tell you, and you know, you are way more expert in these matters than I, but I was really knocked out by how distinct the nose and the flavor of this wine was when I first tried it, which was only about an hour ago. Really had a delicate, lovely bouquet, a little bit of leather. I also got a little bit of florals and medium tannin, medium acid, very smooth finish. It still had the punch of Zinfandel, but this wine was distinctly, the first thing I thought about was the soil, was the terroir. And it struck me how different it is because of its origin. But talk a little bit about it, the wine and the tasting notes, if you would.
Of course, this is a wine that the Zinfandel is quite the last one we harvested. So we first harvested Primitivo in red soil, then in the sand near the seaside, and then in white soil, and the last one is black soil. So the vines has more time, they get richer, and they develop a lot of spice. That this is the distinct element that is more similar to Californian Zinfandel. And I think this is the brotherhood of the Italian Zinfandel that I grow here, because it's really spicy, rich, but is still Italian, so it's a little more elegant, less.
It has more elegance, it has more finesse, and that's not a knock against the New World Zinfandels. It just, you get that elegance and the smoothness in the finish, which was really very distinct for me.
Yeah, this is a little bit the Italian way, the Italian job we made. Also, it's our style. We like wines that keep the balance and the elegance. Even if it's very rich wine, is more than 15 alcohol, is very concentrated. There's a lot of extract, and but this spice, the licorice and the black pepper, is so it reminds the nice Zinfandel from Russian River.
Absolutely. So two quick questions. Just give us your quick thoughts, quick answers. What's your favorite meal to pair this Zinfandel with from Puglia in Italy? And where do we get it? Where do we, in America, where can I buy this wine?
This wine have several importers. You can find.
I know it's on wine.com. Yeah.
Probably, I don't know, because I sell to importers. Yeah. For sure, you can find in ABC in Florida.
Yeah.
In Chicago, different. Also in California, it's. Golden State importers.
Mm-hmm. And what's your favorite food to pair this wine with?
I have two foods. One is international, lamb.
Lamb, okay.
Lamb.
Okay.
And one is typical from Puglia, and I invited you to come here in this space to share with us.
I'm coming. My wife wants to come too. Can she come?
Oh, of course. You have to. Melanzane alla parmigiana.
It's eggplant parmigiana.
Bravo.
Excellent.
But a Puglian way, not international way.
Well, listen, this has been great. Thank you so much. Cheers to you, and thank you for staying up so late. It's now 12:36 at night in Puglia. And Gregorio, you're a rock star. Thank you for doing this. And we will see you next year in person in San Francisco at ZinEX.
Grande Zap. Thank you. I thank all the friends from California, Rebecca, and the friends of Zap. See you next year.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, everybody, we're going to wrap up this session. We'll go to break, and Rebecca will be back with some final thoughts and final words. Thank you.
We were established when your great-grandparents worked the land. We were there when your grandfather bought his first house. And again, when your mother started her business. At Exchange Bank, we continue to evolve with you by investing in technology and the communities in which you live, so that you and all generations to come are well invested for the future. Exchange Bank, invested to empower future generations.
Hello, everyone. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed these sessions today as much as we have. It's been amazing. And I want to again thank the team at New York Wine Events, Sam Kimball and his group, and our staff for keeping the show going. And big shout out to all of those amazing winemakers. Just absolutely wonderful to see everybody and hear those stories. And there's more fun. So please, plan on joining us again tomorrow. We will kick off again at 1 o'clock with a whole new batch of Meet the Makers sessions. And the schedule, for those of you who may not have seen it and just come on and, here it is. We do have the schedule posted. It is in the middle bar, just on the main page. So I want to end by, again, recognizing all of you out there who love Zinfandel, who want to connect and to enjoy the great heritage and history of this grape. It is truly my passion and my privilege to be able to lead this illustrious organization. And I hope that you will join us in supporting ZAP and our member wineries. Buy a bottle, join the organization, spread the word. It's all great. And so on that note, we are going to keep the booths open for you to visit the winemakers. They are technically here until 4 o'clock today. However, if you are involved in a great conversation, they're not going anywhere. They're going to stick around and enjoy chatting with you. So I know they're looking forward to it. And so on that note, I want to thank again all of our sponsors and everybody involved with making this happen. And we'll see you tomorrow, and looking forward to it. I'm going to go have a glass of Zinfandel now. Take care. Bye-bye.
There's this phrase, maybe you've heard it, a legend was born. But if you've ever been able to stand neck deep in a California Zinfandel vineyard and seen the fruit produced by over 100 years of effort and struggle, you may have drawn another conclusion. There is no single moment when a legend becomes a legend. Real legends are built from year upon year of determination and grit. So real legends, they're not born. Real legends are grown.